Hello there. Today I'll be discussing things that are mostly absent from the abortion debate. Now, some of the things I'll be talking about are discussed a little bit, but not heavily like they should be. These should be the points that are at the forefront of the discussion. So what I'm going to do is give my best attempt to equip you with a better suit of armor and better details and facts that you can have these discussions and maybe have a better breakthrough to the other side. So I have a little bullet point list here. I have 6 items to discuss, and I'll just list them for you real quick, and then we'll talk about each one. Number 1 is the root causes of such high levels of abortion. Number 2 is cycle tracking, menstrual cycle tracking. Number 3 is forced impregnation, and you guys know, or forced impregnating somebody, you guys know what the word is for that, and for some reason you can't say words anymore that are important. So forced, and then incest and medical reasons. So that's the third topic we'll talk about, because there's a lot of lies going on in a certain socio-political faction, and these lies are easily debunked. Number 4, we're going to discuss the Clump of Cells argument, or zygote, whatever they want to call it. And then number 5, we'll be discussing forcing motherhood upon young people or women, young men and women, forcing parenthood on people who don't want to be parents, and they would be horrible parents who would raise horrible new batch of humans. And 6, we're going to talk about baby parts in the medical and beauty industry. Number 1, the root cause of such high levels of killing babies in the womb is the drastic rise in promiscuity, self-indulgence, debauchery, and sexual immorality. So, and before I get into all of this, I want to let you know that I have a personal interest in this topic. I was once a young man living in a world where, or living in a society where abortion was an acceptable way to be careless sexually. So we could be careless sexually and then just kill our babies out of sexual carelessness and sexual immorality. So when discussing this thing with people, you have to bring up the fact, and it doesn't have to be a long drawn out thing, you just bring up the fact that we're self-indulgent, debaucherous, we're highly promiscuous. And it's sad that our young men and women have gotten this way. And there's a certain side of the aisle in America who promotes this self-indulgent, debaucherous, immoral kind of lifestyle. So without even having the debate, you could go at that. You could battle that problem, and that will reduce the amount of babies that are being killed in the womb. And I'm not somebody who's religious, but I'm also not an atheist, and I'm tending to lean more towards let religious people who are, now I'm not talking about the fake religious people who don't follow the word. I'm talking about the real religious people who actually follow the word, and they set a good example of not being hypocrites within the religion. Those are the people that we're going to have to let take control of the wheel for a while, because with the rest of us driving, we have no guide. We have no moral guide, and we think that we can make this all up as we go along and turn our backs on thousands and thousands of years of moral structuring to keep the human from self-destructing and to stop the human from doing things like we're doing now, killing millions and millions of babies inside the womb. That's not a good thing. That is an evil thing. So I'm hoping that Christianity, most of all, because Christianity is what structured this great nation that is the most attractive nation in the world, And that's why it gets talked about so terribly, is because let's say you're the lead quarterback or the starting quarterback or the head cheerleader. The ones that are not in your position are going to envy and some hate you. So hate comes through envy, and that's clear in almost any situation in life where when people can't perform as well as others, they want to dig their claws into those at the top and drag them down to where everybody's even and nobody shines and nobody falls behind. It's just like one big gray mess. So that's why the United States, it's the most attractive nation, the most free nation. It created the largest number of rich non-white people in history. So you can say anything you want about white supremacy, and we all see you're full of crap, because the data shows that this country makes stable families economically for all people of all colors and all religions. And the fact that white people are the largest population of poor people in the United States is another clear indication that the children of the lie cannot be reasoned with. All right, so number 2, we're going to talk about cycle tracking. Now this one, I don't hear anybody talking about this, and it's something that my wife and I do. We track her menstrual cycle because we've had as many children as we want to have now, and we want to be very careful that we don't produce too many children. So we're tracking her period cycle or her menstrual cycle, and we stay away from copulation in just 4 or 5 days. There's no vaginal intercourse. And there's other things you can do besides vaginal intercourse to have a good time. And that's why I find it astounding that nobody's having this discussion really about young men and women downloading apps that they can have on their phone that will track their menstrual cycle for you. And all those young people have to do is not have vaginal intercourse during just maybe 5 to 7 days, I think it is. And you will drastically increase the chances of avoiding killing your baby in the womb. So that's going to be just a little piece of advice that I'm going to give to the people debating this topic. If you're for saving lives and bringing a sense of morality back and a sense of rationality back to us, you can suggest that to people, and then when they show their true nature, if you give them that great advice, they'll show their true nature by arguing that great advice. And you'll see what they're really like. Because nobody can really argue that advice or say that it's bad advice. But they will, because you know why. All right, now we're going to talk about the R word, which is forced copulation, incest, and medical emergencies, reasons for having abortion. Now this one is so ridiculous because the left in the United States uses this excuse as why they need women to have abortion rights when 95% of all abortion cases are just sexual irresponsibility, sexual immorality, having sex too young, having sex before marriage, having sex outside of marriage, and it's also just older people who don't want the burden. They slip up and then they don't want the burden of having to raise a human. And the data is clear. The data is undebatable, but yet they're going to debate it. And I'm going to have the data on the screen here, and you can see it for yourself. And even if you can't see the data on my screen right now, all you have to do is open a search engine and type in the percentage of abortions that are elective or non-elective. You can find the percentage of abortions that are forced copulation, incest, and medical emergencies. So somewhere, even if it's 80%, let's say it's 60% are just sexual carelessness and people being dumb, so they got to kill their babies. That's still too much. But we're at 90+%, guys. 90+% sexual carelessness and immorality. Now, going back to the promiscuity thing for a second, we've had waves of this happen in the past where self-destruction rises up. There's waves of self-destruction that rise up in a socio-political sense in the United States, to where in the 1920s it happened, where people just got so free and debaucherous and self-indulgent that we started to self-destruct, and then a more rational type of human has to group up and steer the ship back on course. So instead of heading into hard waves that will shatter and splinter the ship to toothpick-sized pieces, we have to find a better route to navigate so we don't destroy ourselves. And that's what some good people did back then. And now we have the 1950s, where we saw the height of that order. The 1950s, I think, was one of the golden ages of the United States of America. But then we slipped again, and we allowed these serpents to wriggle back up and show their heads again. And what happened was the 60s and 70s. And the 60s and 70s, where we had the free love and hippie movement and all that stuff, and the hate for America, and it was all such a self-destructive time that I don't think we've ever recovered from the 60s and 70s. In the 80s, there were certain moral characters and people on the right side of the aisle that got us back to a little bit out of that self-destructive mode. They got us back to stability and prosperity again. And we seem to go through these cycles. It's like an ebb and a flow, or like a pendulum swinging. So the ebb and flow we go through in the United States it's that way because we have the form of government that we have. So the form of government we have is such that it allows us to have moments of weakness, then moments of strength. Moments of weakness, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but that's the way it is. And I think it's a good system because we can't stay self-destructive for too long. And we can't stay too strict and boring for too long. So I find that I believe that there is a middle ground to be struck between strict and self-destructive. And when we find that middle ground, we're at our best in America. Okay, so make sure that when you're debating people, you have the data in your hand showing how many 90+% of abortions are sexual immorality and sexual carelessness, just not giving a damn. Then we have number 4 is the clump of cells argument. Now this one I do see people successfully destroying that logic, where people will say, well, it's just a clump of cells and not a human. It's not a baby. Or they'll say it's a zygote or whatever they call the thing. But even right when the sperm hits the egg, that's a new human. The reason why they say something like that is because they don't want to relate the fact that they were once that clump of cells. They don't want to relate the fact that They were once this zygote thing they call or whatever, and they were a baby at an early development stage, and they don't want to admit that that's a baby at its earliest development stage. So you wouldn't take a baby that, and what I see from good people is that they say, when a baby comes out and it's 1 year old, it can't care for itself, and if it's not fed, cleaned, and housed, it's going to pass away. Same for old, when you're elderly. If you're not cared for, when you can't care for yourself anymore, you'll pass away. You'll just die. So being elderly is also another stage of human development where you're a burden on others. But that doesn't mean we should just club them in the head and throw them off the cliff. They should be cared for. So these are all just stages of human development in the span of a lifetime. And it's demonic. It's really demonic, honestly. There's no other word for it. It's demonic to have the thought that a baby, a baby in its earliest development stage is not a human. It's disingenuous, it's a big giant lie, and it's an excuse they use. Just like the forced copulation, incest, and medical reasons. It's an excuse. It's a lie. We are dealing with children of the dragon, children of the lie, and their lies must be exposed. You can do it rationally, and if they're not going to listen, then don't have the conversation. But if you have the conversation or the chance to have a rational conversation with one of them without them hitting you in the face or spitting at you or attacking you in some way, assaulting you, then you got to get these things into their head. Then if they deny it, you're dealing with a child of the lie, a child of the dragon. And I say that metaphorically, of course. Basically what I mean is the forces of evil and wickedness, death and destruction. That's what I'm talking about. All right, so the next point is forcing motherhood. Now this one is tricky for me, and what I see is that some people just want to say, oh, nope, you can't abort that baby, you got to have it, and you got to be a mom and dad now. Or you got to be a single mom now. Or you got to be young parents now. Now, they could give it up for adoption and other things like that, but usually what's going to happen is if a young woman is forced to carry a baby to term, she'll probably develop a maternal attachment to where she doesn't want to give it up. I would say that happens a lot of the time, where somebody in the beginning might not have that bond formed yet, but at month 9, you're going to have a bond that is not present in the beginning. So what happens is the most irresponsible, wicked, and careless people are then going to become parents and raise the new generation that's coming up that has to live alongside your children and you when you're elderly. Do we want that kind of person raising the new batch of humans? So there we have a problem on our hands. If we want to save these babies, we're going to have to come up with solutions that take the baby from the parent that does not want it. Incentivize it. Give them something that's so rewarding and such an incentive that they carry the baby to term and then hand it over to more decent, stable people. So that's just an idea. I mean, it might not work, but I think it's worth noodling around and talking about and seeing what kind of solutions we can come up with. Instead of spending all this money destroying, we could spend some of the money doing something actually practical and rational. And instead of sending money to foreign wars and foreign aid where other countries are just self-destructing, we keep slapping band-aids on them. So we could take some of that money and we can use it towards incentivizing young people who don't want to be parents yet to carry the baby to term in a loving way, in a healthy way, without drug abuse and all that. You'll have to make sure that they're not abusing drugs or alcohol and things like that. No substance abuse. And then incentivize that somehow. I haven't really thought about it too deep, but I think there's somewhere to go there if we try. All right, now the last point is, oh man, this is so sinister. I almost don't even want to talk about it. Baby parts used in the medical industry and the beauty industry. Now you can look into this yourself. I'm not going to get too bogged down in it, talking about it, but it really needs to be talked about. This is something that I believe we have so many abortions, and it's so accepted because there's so many companies and individuals getting rich off of using baby parts, aborted baby parts, in the medical industry. For instance, stem cell, you can rebuild a lot of the parts of your body and a lot of the systems of your body using stem cells. And it goes way deeper than that. There are things I can't even mention here, censorship. So I want you to look into it yourself, how the baby parts are used in the medical industry and the beauty industry. And that's the sickest part of that whole topic, is that people are using baby parts to make themselves prettier and better looking or different looking. So it's demonic. It's pure evil. They don't see it that way. They see it as it's just another biological creature that doesn't matter, that the earth just randomly created. And that's why they're so evil and self-destructive and destructive to the child and the baby in the womb, is because in their mind they don't believe that a human is anything special. They believe that a human is just like an ant that you can squish and eat for nourishment, or rub on your face to rejuvenate. That they have no value for human life, and that is a demon, metaphorically speaking, of course. Okay, so that's all of my bullet points, and make sure that you bring some of these topics to the surface when you're having this debate with people, because these topics are mostly absent from the debate. And also, I think it's time for us agnostics and atheists to become more spiritual. Understand that there is something beyond this realm. I'm not going to say or guess what it is, but I feel it in my bones. Every cell in my body feels it. This is not just random biology. The human is not just random biology, and neither is every creature on this earth. And I don't think this earth itself is random cosmic dust smashed together. I could be wrong, but in my gut and deep in my bones, it feels wrong that it's all just random and not ordered by a much, much, much higher intelligence. We could be living in a dream. All right, so I'm no religious nut, and I'm definitely not a white supremacist, because that's their go-to thing nowadays, is if you don't agree with them, you're white supremacist. I'm Arab. I do love white people just as much as I love black people. Brown, yellow, purple, it doesn't matter. And so they're so evil that they have to make up lies in order to make political gain. Every one of their political advancements over the last 30 years, even since the civil rights movement, has been a lie. All easily provable lies. One of the first colonists in early America in Virginia, owned a slave legally lifelong. The first guy to own a slave legally lifelong in Virginia was a black man. Why don't you teach that to people? There were so many, and he imported so many other Africans, and they were not slaves either. They were called indentured servants that had a service term, a contract term, and at the end of that term, their work term, they got land and pay. Everybody's being full of crap here in the United States. So you have to battle them with the truth. Equip yourself with the truth better. So when somebody says USA is white supremacist, just start with that fact right there, and then start with the fact that even Native Americans were working right alongside the black man and the white man, owning slaves, having businesses, plantations, whatever you want to call it, whatever was happening back then. There were so many businesses back then that blacks, whites, and natives owned. It wasn't just white people getting rich here. And another thing I want to say about the whole white supremacy thing is that why is there descendants of them left? If the United States is white supremacist, why are there descendants of all the black and natives still left here? Because whites didn't kill them off because they're not that bad of people. Go to other countries' history where they did have slaves and see if there's a bunch of white descendants of the slaves from the Barbary slave trade. Where are all the descendants of the slaves, the white slaves from the Barbary slave trade? They don't exist. And you know why, and I know why. Stop being full of crap, America. And you guys that are on the side of rationality, you got to equip yourself better with data and facts and you got to speak it rationally. When the child of the lie, when the children of the long-tailed dragon open their mouth, you shove data and facts into it. And I'm not meaning literally, but you shut them down. They're silly arguments that are based on lies. And then if the discussion breaks down and the debate breaks down, you walk away. And then you get yourself a suit of armor. You make yourself strong. You don't be someone that assaults or hurt people, but you become dangerous. That's how you win. When there's no more talking to be done. When they don't allow rational discussion and debate to flourish any longer, which is what we're coming up against. So, there you go. There's some stuff you can use in your abortion debate that you're having with people. The child of the lie is very aggressive. The child of the lie is very dangerous. They made themselves dangerous. And that's why they're winning the battle. I'm not saying match them in their terroristic tactics or their lying, but you have to make yourself dangerous in a different way that is based on love, self-preservation, and preservation of this great republic that attracts the most people in the world every year to it, despite all the lies and deception. This is the greatest nation on earth, and we should try to bring it back to a more honorable, noble, and moral society.